Hey, everybody, this is Chris Mahan. I'm back with another Lead Your Team podcast in our special series After the Cap and Gown. We've had some incredible guests so far, and today is no exception. We have the awesome Dr. Andre Walton. He is a TEDx speaker, an international best-selling author, and I'm going to let him tell you all the great stuff that he does because he and I have spoken before, but we didn't record it because it was just us kind of chatting. And he's out west. I'm here in Florida. So, with the technology, we can actually do those things. So today we have an incredible guest, and I want him to just tell you everything he's got going on and how his work and the years of things that he's done can help you, not only as a parent, but your young person. Let them watch this and gain some great insight. So, without any further ado, Dr. Walton, how are you?
I'm doing great, thanks, Chris, and really, really nice to be talking to you again.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our last conversations. And again, I wish we were recording those because we really got into some great stuff. And one of the things I, really enjoy is that you're willing to come on. Like I said, you're a TEDx speaker, you're an author. These are things that I aspire to. So you kind of give me some hope for myself. And one of the things that we talked about before is your work with young people specifically. Guide us through that a little bit, what you do and how this can help parents and their young people guide their next steps into life after graduation and going into adulthood.
Yeah, I mean, I have vivid memories of my years as a teenager, and they can be very, very challenging for all parties concerned, frankly. But yeah, so one of the things that is characteristic of ch- children, adults, young adults of that sort of age, but between I'm talking really between sort of 12 and 20, is those are the years when the mind combines the ability to think creatively, and yet it has got the experience bank and the intellect to be able to put all that together. When you're two, three, four, five, you all you have is creative thinking, because what we do as adults is if we've got a challenge, we we rush off to our memory banks to find a template to use to deal with that challenge.
Mhm.
And it's a very efficient way of doing stuff. I mean, whether you're choosing a particular brand at a grocery store, or if you're deciding to move house, we use these templates all the time. You don't have that when you're 2, 3, 4 years old. You've got a blank sheet. You've got no history there. So everything is like sort of putting a new piece in a jigsaw puzzle. You're still trying to make sense of your world. Well, by the time you get into your teens, you've pretty much made sense of most of your world. I mean, you're from a kind of um, evolutionary perspective. You're not really threatened in any sort of life sense. You know not to run into the road, and you know not to stick a screwdriver into the electrical socket. I mean, so
Hopefully.
you know, hopefully. But what hasn't happened is you haven't lost your creativity. That tends to disappear as your prefrontal cortex becomes developed in your mid 20s. So you've still got this ability. However, the teen years for a lot of people can be very pressured, and there can be a lot of focus, particularly with ambitious parents, and quite often that will correlate with ambitious kids. And so, one of the things that happens under pressure is the mind becomes more focused. And there are lots of other things that go with that. In our high tech complex world, we tend to think analytically, logically, deductively. There are so many things going on in our lives that require us to weigh things up and analyze things. We even talk quite regularly, don't we, about drilling down and focusing in.
Yes.
And the trouble with that focusing in process is it really does stop us from stepping back and looking at the big picture. And for instance, one of my clients was a girl, 15 years old. She was really very advanced in her knowledge, in her ambitions, in her intellect. And she was really driving herself to a state of depression, confusion, and so on and so forth, about so many different things, most of which were related to the future. Right? That's the other thing about this whole drilling down, focusing in. It creates worry, and nearly everything that we worry about is in the future. There are very few things that are actually really threatening to us right now. And so one of the things that we worked on was using creative thinking to enable her to essentially step back from the problem. You know, she was so close to this whole deal with, you know, university applications and whether this subject and how am I going to study this and this because some of the classes overlap. And I mean, you know, it was just a nightmare. And she wanted to get everything done by yesterday. You know, so basically creativity and creative thinking, which is a little different, it's the thing that comes before creativity. So we're not talking, you know, kind of, okay, I'm going to buy a paint box and start painting things. You know, this is about how we think. This is about a very broad process of actually thinking. And it helps us step back and see the big picture. It helps us say, you know what, if you don't happen to graduate from high school, you know, at the age you are now, if that was at 1 year further down the line, firstly, it's no disaster. Secondly, it might even be positive. You might have a better idea what you actually really want to do, you know, when you get out of college. And so, you know, or many other things that it takes the pressure off, in other words, and it really helps people be in the moment, and it gives you perspective. And I think if I look back on my years, I didn't academically do particularly well at school.
Me either.
I mean, I was sort of, you know, I did enough. And I didn't go to college straight after school. I was just itching to do other stuff. And indeed, by, you know, the time I was 21, I'd patented 2 inventions, and by 25 I got a business. By 27 I was moving to America because the company was now an international business. And so I actually didn't do my my first degree until I was in my 30s, and I did that in parallel with running my business. And so, you know, that was fine for me, and that really worked. I needed to get stuff done when I left school. But the point is, I think if I had attempted to deal with the university immediately after high school, I really would have been in a serious quandary. I mean, I was very interested in electronics. I was very interested in physics. One of my first jobs when I left school was as a graphic artist for a publishing company. So there's all these things I wanted to do. And I think that I don't think there's anything unusual or anything unhealthy about it. But when somebody or a situation is pressuring you to focus on what subjects you want to do in a situation like university where you don't really have a sort of broad range. I mean, if you're going to focus on science, then, you know, most of your topics are not going to include music, English, choreography, acting. You know, they're going to be, so there's got to be some sort of degree of focus there. So creative thinking is a very, very powerful tool, and I really try and help my teenage clients realize that it's also something that you actually have to do a little bit of work to hang on to. You have to pay attention to what kinds of things are occupying your thoughts and how to deal with them if you're going to carry on being creative. Because whether you're going to end up being a physicist, an entrepreneur like myself, a coach like myself, or various other different things, creative thinking is something that will really allow you to get the best out of your whole life.
So I agree with everything you're saying. And like you, well, I don't want to put myself in your boat. I'm not a PhD, but I had a hard time in school, in which, I told you, didn't realize it back then that I have dyslexia. So reading, math, everything, staying focused was so difficult for me that I just focused on other things. Basketball being sports, it was very easy for me to do sports. When I got out of high school, actually, I was in high school, I started working in film, and I realized that I loved that too. And I was encouraged to do that. How important is it for parents to see something that their child is wanting to do, even if it doesn't meet like a family norm? I mean, no one expected me to go, "Hey, Dad, I want to get into teen modeling." That wasn't quite the what he thought I was going to say. At the same time, though, he was very encouraging to it. They found a school, and within 30 days of going to school, I did my first little like local magazine cover thing for a mall, different stuff back in the 80s, lots of different shows, and started doing commercials. And that translated into a 25 plus year career in the film and TV industry. All of that would have been nothing if I hadn't had the proper support and encouragement at 16, 17 years old to do that. Yeah. So for parents, if their kid is saying something to them like, "Hey, I want to get into this field," or "I want to maybe take a year off and go figure things out," how important is it for parents to look at their big picture and say, maybe this isn't a bad thing, as opposed to saying, "No, you're going to go to school right away. You're going to follow this, this path." I mean, what can parents do to kind of get themselves in the mindset of saying, "Okay, let me look at the big picture for my son or daughter"? Like, how can they do that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think there are a number of things. One of is that parents can actually look around at the people around them as adults. And I think that they will see quite a lot of people who made choices about what they were going to study at university, what job they were going to have when they got out of university, who in their, let's say, late 30s to mid 40s are scratching their heads thinking, this is really not what I was suited to do. And, or if they haven't quite defined that, it might just be, I don't know what's missing in my life, but I need to find out. And the percentage of people, I get a lot of people that I talk to that are in that category.
Yeah.
And, being in that category at that age, it's not necessarily terribly easy to say, okay, well, let's figure out what you want to do and let's get you doing it. You've got you've got a family, maybe you've got a house with a quite significant overhead. You've got, in other words, to make your nut, you've got to be earning, some good cash, and you're not going to do that if you suddenly decide you're going to become, a graphic artist, or you're going to study to be an alternative medicine, practitioner, or whatever it is. Those changes leave you, with a significant career gap that sometimes has consequences. So I think it's very important for kids to have some real idea of what drives them at the earliest possible age. I mean, but you're not going to find that by sort of concentrating hard and thinking. I mean, you're going to try it. You're going to find it by trying things. And if you start to think, when I was a teen, I've been a musician since I was 4. I started to learn the piano when I was 4, and I've always been a musician. I mean, I played the guitar, and then in my 20s I became a professional flautist, and also took up the saxophone, and I took up jazz, and that was my love for the next 30 years. But I remember in my teens. I once sort of, said over dinner, there were some friends of my parents over dinner and stuff, and they had the usual kind of conversations. Well, Andre, what are you going to do when this kind of thing? And, I made the mistake of saying, well, I'm just passionately fond of playing the guitar, you know. And oh my God, I mean, you'd think that I had, chosen some profession, I'd like to be a porn star or something. I mean, it was just, it was just ridiculous. And you literally had sort of, the old jokes coming out. I mean, sort of, you do know the difference between a musician and a large pizza, don't you? What are you talking about? Well, at least the large pizza can feed a family of four.
Right.
I mean, it's just, those kind of jokes are a reflection of what was really. Nobody realized at that point that, through the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and you were going to get a whole, a whole culture of multi-millionaire, knighted by the Queen. I mean, that's not what musicians were in the image of most people. I mean, it was just so.
I hate to do it, but in this book, I talk about the film industry, and one of the things in there is the myth that you can't make money in the arts, because like you just said, so many parents will tell their kid, oh, you can't make money doing that. Like, well, yeah, you can. Fear, I think, is one of the things that transcends into all these conversations, where it's the fear, maybe the parent thinking, my kid's never going to leave home, my kid's going to be homeless, my kid's never going to have a good life, because they are using a creative pathway to being happy and to have a career. I know that I heard some of that early on because of my lack of academic prowess. People questioned everything that I wanted to do. And if you look over here, if I listened to them, I wouldn't have any of these. I wouldn't have either of these books. Behind me, right over here, that's a replica of the Queen Alien from Aliens Romulus that my brother made. He made that film. Beneath that, on the next shelf, is from Spider-Man 4, which he made. He's done very well in Hollywood. I like to think that I've done pretty well in what I'm doing as well. But had we not had the encouragement from our dad and our mom too, to really try. At one point, my brother wanted to leave. He was in California. He left at graduated at 17, went to California. And the first year in California back in 1980, 81 was really hard for him. So he's like, I'll come home. I'll go to Michigan State and be an art teacher. And my dad said, no, you've only been out there 6 months. Art teachers are being laid off in the state of Michigan, and you have too much love of what you're doing. So we started doing movies when he was 9. So my dad said no. And so within a few weeks of that conversation, Shane got on his first actual movie. And then that led to meeting more people. He ended up meeting Stan Winston and worked for Stan until Stan's passing in 2008. And he now he's one of the owners of Legacy Effects. Had he not stayed in California, had our parents said, nope, you got to come home, you're right, it's too much out there, it's too crazy, he wouldn't be who he is today. And I think for parents to see that big picture back then, when it was so weird. We grew up in a town of 8,000 people in the middle of Michigan, little town of Michigan. So the idea of going to California, or the idea of working in film, the idea of doing something was so outlandish, especially back almost 40 plus years ago. So for parents today to be able to have that ability is so critical. And if their kid doesn't make it, so what? They tried, right? Like,
I think that's a major message. I several times in my life I've felt, okay, what I'm about to do is really a gamble. I mean, leaving England, to my business there, training people to run that. Well, I came to the States to open the American company for my business. I mean, everybody around me, the bank manager was getting all nervous because he thought the whole thing was going to collapse in a pile of ashes. And my financial advisor, say, Andre, you don't have the resources to do this. Do you not see that? And so I did it. And within a year, that had doubled the size of our revenue globally. And we were. I mean, it was about something like 5 months before we broke even in America. So it was just, I think it's clear it's very necessary to have some idea in your mind. If this doesn't work, is it a disaster? And of course, it never is. I mean, if you, for instance, devoted 3 or 4 years to becoming a professional actor, let's say, and it didn't work out, well, so you drive an Uber until you get to the next project. I mean, it's not, and the point is that if people are doing the kinds of things we're talking about, in general, they are the people that are really committed to that task. It isn't a kind of, well, yeah, I've got this job, I don't really like it, so I think I'm going to try acting or something like that. I mean, it's not that. It's like, no, this is what I'm going to do. This is my life. I am an actor. And, that sure, there's a plethora of actors who do not get to the point, where they've got to try and find a way of losing income, otherwise they're paying too much tax. I mean, that's a rarity in that field. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that your life is you're going to be living in a flophouse somewhere. I mean, if you're a good actor, then you can be an acting coach. You can work at an acting school as an acting teacher. There are all sorts of ways that you can make a living doing what it is you want to do, even if it's not the mainstream focus of that industry. And I think, the key thing, though, is that so very seldom is it a disaster when one of these things fails. And if you go into the whole process with, there are going to be rough bits in the road, but they are learning moments. And if the whole thing blows up, that's a big learning moment. And I think it's difficult for parents because, of course, they want the very best for their children. They want them to be successful. But I think it's a really important lesson for parents to make sure that success is not solely related to income. I mean, that's the biggest lesson I think that parents have to take on board, that success is actually related to happiness. There are very few other definitions that make sense. I mean, in the course of my business, I've met people that are now billionaires. I've worked with people, in Richard Branson and in his businesses. I mean, he has created many, many multimillionaires around him, and I've worked with that set of companies very, very closely. And it is certainly not true that the more wealth they have, the happier they are. I mean, there is no question that relationship, if anything, is rare. And so, forget about the cash. Yes, we need to be able to live, and we need to be able to, we need a certain amount of money to achieve things, like a sort of a family that's living comfortably, or whatever your goals are in that regard. But, the bottom line is that if you really do what you do with passion and you do it well, it is going to be very rare that you don't make enough money to live comfortably.
That is, everything you just said is so perfect, because when I grew up, everything was, if you don't do a certain thing or go to a certain school or have a certain income, then you were frowned upon back in the 80s. For me, it was a struggle because I knew what I wanted to do, but I was like, how do I get there? Like, that was the hardest thing. When I graduated, I had been working in movies and making a little bit of money here and there. Nothing great. I was young, but I knew that I loved the film industry. I was like, okay, now this was 1986. I thought, I want to make $50,000. Now, back then, 50,000 was pretty substantial. My dad was making a little bit less than that. And within a couple of years, I was making more than that, quite a bit more. And someone in my family, I don't want to say who, I don't want to cause any ruffles here, but some of my family saw my tax return in 1994 and actually got mad at me because I was making more than my dad. And I thought, I work 6 days a week, 14, 15 hours a day. I don't have a life. I just work. And so, I was only in my early 20s. I thought people would have been happy. So the fact that I was actually making money got me in trouble. And, you know, that really sat with me. It's like, so I don't tell anybody other than, a select few what I do. Because to me, it isn't always about money. Do I love doing what I do? Do I love helping people? I don't always charge for life coaching. I don't always charge for a lot of things because ultimately it's going to come back somewhere. And because I love what I do, it doesn't feel like a job to me. I have my bills paid. I have everything I need. I've got money in my 401k. I've got different things. My boys are happy. And so I think looking at what is the definition of success, if it's only a dollar figure, I can give people, just like you just said, countless examples of people with tons of money and families in ruin and broken relationships and multiple divorces and alcohol and drug addiction. And just because it's not about money. Ultimately, for me, it's about, are you innately happy with what you're committing to doing? Are you contributing to your society, to your town? Are you contributing to your family? Are you feeling fulfilled in the work that you do?
Yeah.
And I think that's a shift, a mind shift that is happening now with young people. Because again, 45 years ago, it was all about money. Today, I think young people are saying, hey, mom and dad, I got to make money, I live, but I also want to not have the stress that you have. I don't want to have a heart attack at 50. I don't want to make my career so important that my family is broken and I don't ever see my kids grow up. I mean, I think there's a shift in young people today that within the boundaries of you got to work, you got to eat, but also you got to be happy. I think they're finding a better balance than what we did. I know in my generation, it was all about the image. And now I think kids today are saying, there's more to life than just that. So have you found that to be anything, or am I just seeing things differently in my big picture?
No, I would. I mean, I would certainly agree with you in terms of the goals. Absolutely. In terms of a trend, I think it depends where you are. It's we're in a competitive world, and that mindset of being competitive can lead to lead to material competitiveness, and I certainly see that. But I think one of the things that has happened that has influenced the teenagers that I've coached is they have seen the generation before them continuing to work in areas that they just don't really make them very happy,
Right.
because of all sorts of things, including security. And I think, if you look sort of back at, I suppose 2008 is the archetypal thing, really. That was a huge message to a lot of professionals that they climbing the ladder doesn't necessarily equate to security, and having a job, as a lawyer or an accountant or whatever. Yes,
or a film director.
It's
That
was
year
it
killed me.
absolutely, yeah, for sure. So I think the and aside from that is in when you're talking about the sort of times when we were starting to work. I say we, but there's obviously significant years between us. But back in that era, there was certainly when I was when I was born, that was still in the shadow of World War II, and so that these kind of shadows take a long time for society to get through. So in that kind of era, there was a lot of need for security in people's minds. I mean, that anything like a world war that you're in the middle of is a really insecure kind of process. So, that takes a while to kind of calm down, because it does get passed from one generation to the next. And so I think it's now it's been a long time since people really haven't had any jobs available. I mean, there's nearly always something to do, even if it's not exactly what you want, in order to at least cover your requirements. And so I think that helps. So it goes up and down. Sometimes, I mean, when I was in my 20s, I was sort of working for myself anyway. But before, in my early 20s, I wasn't. I was writing for a living and various other things. I was a journalist and so forth. And there was a huge choice of things to do. I mean, I could have turned my, at that same era, I was also working sort of in electronics for a while. It was very easy to do that kind of thing, and people didn't get too wrapped up about the paper, what bits of paper you had. And I think that, although the paperwork is very important in the sense, certainly when I was, in that kind of age, if you had a good degree from a good school, you were going to get a good job, period. I didn't choose that route, but that was certainly the case. And in my first book, which was published in 2011, I make the point that the currency that we have now in the labour market, in the working environment, is no longer money. It's no longer academic achievement. It is creative thinking. And I see us being in the era of creativity. And there was a kind of an interesting survey done, I think it might have been certainly published in Harvard Business Review, but it may have been, I don't remember who actually did the survey, but it was a significant number. I mean, you were talking about thousands of participants. And they found that employers of sort of medium-sized companies, the thing they were crying out for was emotional intelligence. Mm-hmm. He said, that was the single biggest box that was checked, and the bottom line was that they could find, if they advertised a job, they could have a pile this deep. In paper terms, I mean, most of them electronic, of course, but huge numbers of people applying for one or two positions, and the thing that was lacking was anything in those job applications that suggested that this person had emotional intelligence. In other words, what is here that's telling me that these people are going to be good to work with, that they're going to be self-starters, that they're going to have initiative, that they're going to have self-awareness, that they're going to have motivation, and that they're going to have resilience. Mm-hmm. Because nothing's a flat line in the world, is it? So, as we go through ups and downs, you don't want the downs to indicate when somebody's going to crash and burn. And interestingly, the neural pathways related to creative thinking are the same ones that relate to emotional intelligence. The two go hand in hand mentally. So, what I would say to parents and to their offspring is, it is so important to develop a mindset where it is okay to take the initiative in a situation. Okay, sometimes it'll go wrong and sometimes somebody will shout at you, but that's just unfortunate. The reality is that being able to jump in and say, let's just get this done. We need to, why don't we do it this way? I mean, when somebody is driving along the road and you see a motorcycle get struck by a car and boom, it most of the population will stand in a circle and say, "Oh, that's awful." You want to be the person that jumps in there and says, "Well, let's help.
Hmm.
Let's do this." No, no, don't do that. We're going to stabilize his neck. I've seen it done on TV. We're going to be, and somebody needs to call 911 and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
That person is going to exude that kind of initiative into every job application, even university applications. That's what people are looking for. They're looking for people who are genuinely going to take that particular workload, make it their own, and take responsibility for the good things and for the bad things.
Wow, man, we could go on and on. You know, Dr. Walton, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing. I definitely want to have you on again. Again, we could go into so many things. Everything you're talking about is so relevant and so important for parents to think about. We get so wrapped up in our day-to-day operation of how we do our life that we forget about some of the small things, and like you said, the big picture, which is just critical, and encouraging our kids to be creative and to think and
Yeah.
to take that initiative. Just absolutely great stuff. Thank you so much. And where can people find you? Tell us where they can find your books, where they can find your work.
Yeah, absolutely. The Firstly, they can actually ask me a question if they go to askdrandre.com, askdrandre.com. They can actually just push the button and leave a voice message, and I will get back to them in a similar way. They could also go to my coaching site, which is plan, the number four, and the word change, planforchange.org. And from there, they can also leave me a written message or anything you like, really. And anybody that is interested in what I've been talking about in terms of creativity is welcome to just have a look at my show here, the Creativation Show, and it is creativationshow.com, and they can basically find out. It's on all the podcast wherever you choose to listen to your podcast. You'll find that, and that's very new. We're already on episode 4 so far, so there's a few interesting things there if you're interested to expand your understanding of creativation.
That's awesome.
And
I will put all this in the show notes as well, so they'll have links and different things. They can just click it and go.
Great.
Again, this has been awesome, and I can't wait to talk to you again. And the next one will be in the True Parenting Leadership podcast. We'll talk directly to parents and what they can do to really get their kids ready for the next step in life, and maybe some changes that parents can do to be a better parent, better leader. We'll talk
Yeah.
about that next episode, next podcast. All right, with that, guys, I'm gonna wrap this one up. Check out all the podcasts on Spotify, YouTube. We've got this would be our 4th episode, and every person on is a leader in their respective fields. And I've got people all over the country, Canada. This has been a great opportunity. I've loved doing this. So we got more to come. We've got young people coming up, talking about what they've been doing to venture into the world of work and how they got there. We've got some more incredible people like Dr. Andre coming on. So stay with us. We're going to be doing this all summer, and can't wait to get the next one. All right. Thank you, guys. See you later.
Fabulous.